take a seat, and I'm going to invite Aaron Schubert on stage to give us the opening remarks for this session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you just got a chance to get some caffeine to make it through the afternoon. Was just having a very pertinent discussion with Apurva about all of the excellent media coverage that this forum is getting so far. So I think it's a good segue into the next session that we're going to talk about. So we're here today because the clock is ticking on climate change. We've all seen the headlines: raging wildfires, devastating floods, record-breaking heat waves. But these statistics alone are not changing hearts. The stories do. Stories are our most powerful tool. They turn distant, abstract problems into immediate human realities. When we hear the voice of a coastal fisherman watching his livelihood wash away, or see the joy of a village powered by renewable energy for the first time, the climate crisis isn't just a news item, it's personal. I can also add, when my dad calls you, my dad lives in Florida, and his house has been flooded by a hurricane the second time in 1 year. It's very personal. Our mission today is to explore how media, storytellers, and communicators can transform climate action from something technical and distant into something that moves people to act. It's about creating narratives that break the fatigue and that inspire not just awareness, but action. We're here to learn, to collaborate, and most importantly, to inspire. Because in this battle for our planet, every story counts. Let's start sharing stories that don't just inform, but ignite a movement towards a sustainable future. We have excellent speakers today who will be sharing their insights on best practices in climate storytelling, helping us to understand how we can break through the noise, engage hearts and minds, and turn narratives into meaningful action. As climate activists and development professionals, it's important for each one of us in the room to understand and recognize the importance of communication in climate actions and in mobilizing public opinion. I'm eagerly awaiting to hear our expert speakers, and thank you so much for joining today and sharing your expertise. With this, I'll turn it over to Grish from On Purpose for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. There's an unsaid truth about events. They say they save the best for the last. So thank you all for being here. It's a privilege to speak to you about the role of media and communications in accelerating the clean energy transition. And I'd like to start with a question. Can we truly shift to clean energy if consumers don't understand its benefits? Why is this transition required? How does it impact my life? Why am I being asked to switch to electric mobility when the majority are not? Total cost of ownership? What does that even mean? These are some of the questions and challenges we're faced with that need to be addressed for mass adoption of sustainable habits and lifestyles. So to begin with, can I have a quick show of hands, please? If I were to ask you between facts and stories, which is more effective to reach and engage with the public, what would you say? All in favor of facts, please raise your hand. Stories. Okay, I think this session is done. That was easy. So let's start with, in my experience, we need both. It's how facts are presented to consumers that makes the difference. So let's start with why. Stories provide meaning to facts. How we hear stories is affected by our beliefs, our value systems, and the sum total of our life experiences that creates a lens through how we filter information and accept the bits that match what we want to hear more readily than what doesn't. We're all looking for reassurance on our way of being. Stories have the power to shape beliefs, behaviors, and societal norms. By reframing the narrative around the clean energy, we can inspire a cultural shift that drives collective action towards a sustainable future. But don't just take my word for it. Let's hear it from Alina. Arib, can we have the first video, please?
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम अलीना है और मैं आपके लिए एक स्पेशल वेदर फोरकास्ट लेके आई हूँ। अगर हमने वैज्ञानिकों की बात नहीं सुनी तो आने वाले समय में पूरे विश्व में बहुत बड़ी मुसीबत आने वाली है। कैसे? मैं समझाती हूँ। आइए देखते हैं कि 2050 में मौसम का क्या हाल होगा। देश भर में आप लोगों की तरह मैं और मेरे दोस्त भी हीट वेव से परेशान हैं। हीट वेव नहीं समझे? अरे वही जिसे इतने सारे लोग लू या बहुत ज़्यादा गर्मी समझते हैं। अब स्कूल के समर ब्रेक में नाना नानी दादा दादी के घर जाना बंद है और घर से बाहर नहीं आना। इस गर्मी से गिरने से अनेक बच्चे और दादानी की चढ़ाई होती है। और सूरज के साथ रंग बिरंगे फूलों का दिखना भी मुश्किल हो रहा है। किसान और बाढ़ से प्रोग्राम में गिरना बंद और स्कूल में पढ़ाई बंद। मतलब नो मगर मौसम सुधरने के आसार नजर आ रहे हैं। पूरे विश्व रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की हवाओं से टक्कर रहे हैं। सोलर और विंड एनर्जी शहरों और गांव में राहत पहुंचा रही है। मनुष्य, जीव जंतु और पर्यावरण सब खुश हैं। सैटेलाइट द्वारा प्राप्त तस्वीरों से यह स्पष्ट है कि आप लोगों को ये प्रयास जारी रखने होंगे, वरना मौसम फिर खराब हो सकता है। हम मौसम पर निरंतर नजर बनाए रखेंगे और आप तक सीधी खबर लाते रहेंगे, क्योंकि बात सिर्फ मौसम की नहीं, हमारे भविष्य की है।
Alina's video has been created as part of a global campaign with On Purpose, where we're looking after the implementation in India. This campaign is running across 80 countries in partnership with UNDP, and the core idea is to surprise people by getting these videos played in place of the weather forecast on the news, giving people a glimpse into the future and inspiring them with hope and positivity rather than gloom and doom. There is a better way if we take action now, and what better way to reach nonchalant parents but through the voices of their children. To show you how this fits as part of the bigger global picture, here's another impact video. Arib?
We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
We've seen a surge in temperature shifts.
Warning the next few days
are expected to get even worse.
This year alone, we've seen a surge in temperature shifts.
Thousands flee their homes,
facing those massive fires.
It's a global initiative. They're calling it Weather Kids.
Cette campagne est diffusée dans plus de 80 pays.
Let's try and hear more from the weather kid herself, Kaylee.
I'm Kaylee. I'm Maya. Soy Esteban.
Je suis Noah.
It has been a bright start to the day, but that's all about to.
I'm Olive with the very special weather report. From up there to down here, everything is crazy.
If we don't listen to scientists, things are going to be even crazier when I grow up.
Let's look at the forecast for 2050. Heat waves will affect 94% of children, making outdoor kids a thing of the past. Las grandes sequías destruirán las cosechas de trigo. No necesitamos hamburger pizza. My parents hate taxes.
If there's one thing we can all agree on, is that we want a better future for our kids.
We'll keep you posted as we track the gold stuff. Because it's not just a weather report to us. It's our future. Es nuestro futuro.
It's our future.
It's our future. It's our future.
As illustrated by the Weather Kids campaign, facts may present the problem, but stories create emotional connection that drives action. They help people see themselves as part of the solution, turning awareness into motivation and commitment. Highlighting personal stories and real life impact transforms abstract statistics into relatable experiences. This shift fosters a sense of urgency and responsibility, compelling individuals and communities to take meaningful steps towards combating climate change. When stories resonate with people's values and experiences, they have the power to challenge preconceived notions and spark a desire for transformation. This emotional engagement can mobilize communities, influence decision makers, and ultimately drive the necessary actions for a sustainable future. When we're talking about the clean energy transition, we need to ask ourselves, does our communications pass this framework test? Is it relevant? Is it authentic? Is there a clear call to action? Does it tug at our heartstrings and connect with us viscerally as human beings first, and then as professionals? We'll now look at another short case study from our neighboring country, Bangladesh. Arib?
A farmer today and a climate refugee on the next day.
আমার আবাদি কোনো জমি নাই, সব নদী ভাঙনে চলে গেছে।
This is the reality for landless farmers in Bangladesh. The nation faces land shrinkage due to the rising water levels and floods. This threatens food security, causes unemployment, and increases poverty. On the other hand, our rivers face massive plastic pollution, which threatens the environment. MGI, one of the leading conglomerates in Bangladesh with an extensive FMCG portfolio, is named after the river Meghna. As people sometimes dispose MGI's plastic containers into water bodies and MGI can't help control those factors, the conglomerate felt it was the brand's responsibility to do something about this. Presenting MGI Plastic Farming, which uses plastic bottles to create floating farms. To spread the project, we formed a partnership with Bittanando and the local government's agriculture officers. Together with the landless farmer community, we collected plastics from water bodies. Then the local agriculture officers taught the farmers how to create plastic floating beds to farm on water bodies. By using water hyacinth compost and soil on which crops were planted.
নিচের যে স্ট্রাকচার এটা হচ্ছে প্লাস্টিক দিয়ে করা হয়েছে, যার কারণে আমার মনে হয় এটা দীর্ঘ টাইম থাকবে এবং ফসল বারবার হারভেস্ট করা যাবে।
Activations were then held in farmland depleted villages.
There's a famous Henry Ford saying, if I asked people what they wanted, I'd be looking for faster horses. Like him, Steve Jobs also didn't really believe in consumer research. They were both of the opinion that people don't know what is possible until we show them. This was a good example of how a local conglomerate called MGI was turning plastic waste into floating farms. Rather than telling them what to do, they are showing landless farmers what is possible. I'm now going to take you a little further away from clean energy and look at some examples from other areas like environment conservation that rely heavily on storytelling to connect with mass audiences. I'm just going to leave those visuals on the screen. Are they legible from where you're at? So this was a campaign by WWF called The Roomies from the Wild, and it creatively and humorously depicts animals seeking refuge in human homes due to habitat destruction. using eye-catching visuals that make the consequences of environmental degradation tangible. The campaign uses engaging digital integration like social media, podcasts, and interactive stories, personalizing the wildlife's search for new homes, creatively involving influencers and comedians to enhance audience engagement. Closer home, I'd like to share an example of a visually powerful campaign that doesn't actually need very much to be said. Is that visible? Is the text legible from where you're at? Can you see what it's saying on the creative? It's saying still using plastic bottles, and the visual says it all. No conversation on communications and storytelling can be complete without talking about measurement. What you're seeing on screen are a combination of both outputs and outcomes. In our journey towards the clean energy transition, we need both. The outputs are small markers in our journey to understand how we're nudging people forward, one action at a time. The outcomes are the successes we seek, the adoption of more sustainable lifestyles through individual habits supported by an enabling government policy. In conclusion, I'd like to leave you with some concrete takeaways on how to tell better stories. First, simplify complex subjects. Use analogies and metaphors. Break down technical jargon into simpler terms using everyday comparisons. For instance, likening carbon emissions to a blanket trapping heat around the Earth helps people grasp the greenhouse effect. Avoid overloading with too much data. Focus on a few key statistics or visuals that effectively convey the problem. Second, tell stories. Highlight personal stories. Sharing real-life stories about communities affected by climate change can make the issue more relatable. Show rather than tell. Balance the narrative with success stories, illustrating how renewable energy projects have improved lives, or how cleaner technologies are being adopted to inspire hope and action. Use visual communications. For example, before and after comparisons. Visuals that show the impact of interventions, example, solar installations, can help audiences see the benefits of these actions. Link climate action to daily life. Explain how individual actions like energy conservation or using public transport can contribute to a larger solution, helping people see their role in the fight against climate change. Use digital platforms with bite-sized, snackable content that makes it easy for people to understand, encourages them to care and share. And finally, engage with wider stakeholders to generate more public interest. If we're able to create simple guides, animations, or workshops for schools and colleges, we're creating a culture and a behavior pattern that will help these children grow with this as a foundation. By simplifying technical information, telling compelling stories, and using visual aids, we can make the urgency of the climate crisis more comprehensible and actionable for the general public. And now, for the next section of this session, I'd like to invite Richa Mishra, Senior Associate Director, Hindu Business Line, to join me on stage as we discuss the role of media in accelerating the clean energy transition. So Richa is the Chief of Bureau at the Hindu Business Line, bringing over 3 decades of seasoned journalism experience, primarily focused on the energy sector. As an expert in her field, she has delved deep into the complexities of India's energy landscape, establishing herself as a trusted voice in the industry. Richa is also an accomplished author of the book, Unfilled Barrels, India's Oil Story, which explores the country's intricate history with fossil fuels and energy, offering a compelling narrative on India's journey within the changing global energy arena. Is it on? Check. Okay. So welcome, Richa, and thank you for joining us today. To begin with, tell us about your book, Unfilled Barrels. What learning or lessons does it hold for us as a nation? And what insights could be useful for this audience today?
Good evening, and thank you for having me over. It's very rare that I'm on the side of the fence, so like I've literally chewed my nails as to wondering what I might be asked or faced with. Coming to the book and the very title of the book, Unfilled Barrels. So, 20th century definitely belonged to fossil fuel, but 21st century, fossil fuel itself has to compete with various energy resources. And the book is all about that. That, okay, we had a history, we started working on it, where we stand and where we are. Now, before we move any forward, as far as India is concerned, of course, being in media, we always like to criticize what the policymakers are doing. But I have to accept that in the present regime, under the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a target was set. It's not always that you're given targets. A target was set that we have to achieve this, and which for a country like India becomes very important because we are one of the biggest consumers. And today, globally also, we have a voice in the energy space. So coming back to why of the book and how it all happened was that whenever we go out and we talk energy, energy is only focused on power, your electricity. But energy is about a lot of things. Energy is in your daily life also. Energy is on, impacting everyone. It's not just a certain category or a certain segment of people. So it was very important for us to understand also what it is and why we need to talk energy. Of course, today the narrative has completely changed of energy. As far as what I intended to do with the book was, towards the closing, what we want to say is, as I said, for the energy basket has to be so ensembled that it is having everything, something for everyone. The affordability is a very big aspect when we talk energy, a very huge aspect. And how we are using the energy resources has a direct impact on the climate. And that, in turn, has an impact on our daily livelihood. It's a vicious cycle. So it's very important to get at the roots. So that's where it all started.
As a senior journalist you've devoted most of your life and profession to the study of energy in India, what do you see as the biggest challenges in communicating the urgency of climate action to the public?
First and foremost, I'm purely talking as a person who writes on energy and a person who is tracking the sector for almost 2 decades now, is we ourselves have to understand the nuances of the sector. And as you rightly pointed out, facts plus your storytelling capabilities make what people want to understand and hear. For example, if I write this much gigawatt of solar is being produced, I don't know, a man on the street, so what? It has been produced, it has been produced, so what? What does it mean for me is what he wants to know or she wants to know. So the story actually has to start from that point, that if you go for solar or if you go for this, this is what it means. And for this, the person who's writing that story, who's bringing that story to you, or who's doing that reportage, should first understand what it implies in our daily life. So most of us energy reporters, I would say, we go into throwing numbers and jargons. So instead of jargons and numbers, I think we also need to reinvent ourselves and bring into us what it holds for me, what it holds for Richa. If solar is being generated this much, what does it mean for me? I mean, we use the terms like grid connectivity, off-grid, XYZ. In a lot of articles, you'll find, such stories. But then what it actually means is what has to be brought in. And so what it means for the man on the street. And that's where the entire narrative has to change. And it always may not be a horror story, that you'll be flooded and you'll be this and that. Why not take initiatives and make it a step forward that if you do this, you will not suffer this. Instead of saying this has happened because you did this. Just change the narrative. It becomes a very interesting story. I don't know how many, I'm sure everyone watches films here. So there was a very interesting film which came on The Promised Land, Matt Damon's. It was on fracking. The entire US was going through the fracking, and production of gas was happening and everything. Of course, the film didn't do well. But so there was a narrative. It was talking about it. Back home here, if anyone has watched Shah Rukh Khan's Swadesh, he generates electricity from hydro. And the entire process, so that's also a storytelling, it is actually telling a story that this is what you can do. So my point is that as reporters, as journalists, we also need to reinvent ourselves. This, I think, somewhere we go missing. It's an honest confession, we do go missing.
No, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So what role do you see for collaboration between journalists, energy experts, and policymakers in accelerating the clean energy adoption and climate action?
So, all the stakeholders have to, I'm not saying they have to be on the same page always, because the approach, the views, the opinions may vary. The expert may think is right. As a reporter, I may have a different view on that. So difference of opinion is very healthy. The debates happen. But there is definitely a lack of communication between the subject experts, the players who are into the sector, and the media. There is somewhere, a disconnect. Even the policy makers, there is a disconnect, and all stakeholders have to communicate with each other in a language, not without trying to show, I know more than you. Everyone knows only this much, and only when the dots are connected, the previous session which we had, unless all come together and dots are connected, we cannot communicate the actual narrative.
So where do we start?
We start right first. We start talking. We're talking among each other, talking with each other. Say, for example, a certain policy decision is happening. For example, nowadays green hydrogen is the buzzword. Seeing green is actually in Urban Dictionary very envious, but the buzzword today is green hydrogen, and everyone talks green hydrogen. We are also talking green hydrogen. But what is green hydrogen? For green hydrogen, what kind of resources are required? So you have to start, just throwing that word doesn't happen. You have to start talking about it. So, and it begins from each sitting, chatting, communicating, understanding, and then bringing it out to the public.
I've got a list of questions here, but I'm also conscious that we're very privileged to have someone like Richa with us on stage, and we've got a room full of energy experts. I was wondering if anybody here would be interested in asking a question. We'd be very happy to open the floor. Anyone?
I think after a good meal, everyone is taking a break.
Okay. I'll come back to my questions, but if anyone thinks of anything, please feel free to raise a hand and we'll get a mic to you. So, how has the coverage of climate change and clean energy evolved over the years in the media? And what trends do you foresee in the near future?
So coverage has definitely gone up, and we now, most of the publications or digital media or news channels, everyone is having dedicated space for renewable energy, green energy. We're talking about it. It's a talked about subject. But the point, and again, they're picking up players. Players are also coming forward, smaller, not only the big corporates, the smaller players are also coming forward and talking about it. But the point is just the visibility enough, or what are we looking for? We are looking for what's happening on the ground, and whether what we are talking about is having a trickle effect on the ground or not. So how much are we succeeding there and where? I think assessment should also be done. So when the policies are also brought out, it's very important to sometimes go back and do a stock taking. Like in the previous session, we were hearing what SECI had to say about the bids which were coming and the entire bidding process, or what the railways was doing, or what, the session just prior to this. So claims are made, not only here, everywhere, but we also need to see, go back at least a year or so, and then try to see, revisit whether what has been spoken about, whether it is happening or not on the ground. It shouldn't remain on paper.
Okay. I think as a sort of, since we are the last session before closing,
The
Richard,
gentleman there was asking.
does somebody have a question?
There.
Is someone asked?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the stage and sharing your insights. When we turn on the TV, there's 20 channels on cricket, and there are ever so many other channels on every other theme that's possible. Is there an OTT channel on energy, on clean energy, where we can go to and look at various themes, topics, films? Thank you.
I'm glad you asked that. So most of the channels are paid channels. So I would request most people don't go for sports channels and go for green channels. On a serious note, there are certain channels who come out with serious programs, but fully dedicated, I'm yet not aware. But there are programs and news channels, talking about news channels, if you're watching a CNBC or a CNN or BBC, or our local channels, NDTV. NDTV runs a whole program on it. And it's a full day thing. They have a marathon on green. So there are, like I can talk about our newspaper. We have a full dedicated space, full page on just clean technology, on green. So yes, there are places, unfortunately, as we were just talking, that it doesn't attract attention as easily as the other channels do.
If I might just add to that, Richa, and you know, my personal opinion, though, Bhaskar, is that maybe it's a good thing that these conversations are not happening in niche channels and spaces. Because what we really need is for these conversations to happen on the mainstream channels and be made more mainstream in more popular national narratives. So thank you very much. We did manage to get one question, and now I'm going to ask Apurva to join us on stage for some closing remarks. Sorry, there was another question.
Yeah, how you define evidence-based communication to propel energy transition? Evidence-based communication to propel the energy transition.
How would you define evidence-based communication for energy transition?
See, any story which we do, if it is not based on evidence and facts, then we're just creating a myth. So our stories, our narratives are based on facts and numbers which have come out, and then only we move forward. The basis, the crux, or the protagonist of the story is always the facts and evidence or the numbers. And then the debate and discussions happen. Now, how I present it is a challenge which I have to deal with it.
When we are talking about, in the energy sector, about the household and the beneficiaries, sometimes it becomes a bit tricky, right, while talking about the evidence. So how to cooperate with that?
So there's a very fine example. I'll give an example of the scheme which government of India came out with. It was called Ujjwala scheme. Okay, and it was for LPG, promoting cooking, gas as a source of cooking. And it was so very well utilized. There was evidence as a proof that it's healthier than the chula which they use in households. And it also became, if your health was better, the women were getting chance to go and work. So it became, from a single income family, it was becoming a double income family also. So these data and facts were coming in, and Ujjwala is a finest example of evidence-based incident which has led to, and it's the most successful scheme today.
I'm so happy to see more hands go up, but I think we're out of time. Richa will be available here for a brief period of time over tea, coffee, and networking, so feel free to reach her. But Apurva, please, could we invite you for closing remarks?
So thank you, first of all, Girish and Richa, for this very different session than what we were having for the last 3 days. And the reason why we conceived this session towards the end of SACEF, the reason is because we ourselves as an energy team within USAID are often said, we do not tell compelling stories. We do the work, the technical work, but somehow we fail to connect in terms of telling the impact in a more layman term or a more understood term. So that's why this was the genesis of this session. It was very different. Some of the videos that you showed, Girish, really, you know, it triggers a different kind of a response. I don't want to get into that. Of course, media and communication do play a pivotal role in the way things move, how things get converted, not just as a technical work, but into even a movement. So, you know, it can also be a sometimes media can make or break also certain, so it works both ways. How do we leverage media in terms of having more impactful stories which connect with people, particularly in the energy sector, because energy is an essential ingredient which touches everyone's lives. I mean, you switch off the light and see what happens. So it has an impact on everyone's life. So thank you for this very interesting session. We really want to go forward combining our facts with very compelling narratives. That's a very important lesson that has come out from this session. and would like to demystify complex technologies, involve more stakeholders in the discussions, and invite media to support us in terms of taking these good, impactful stories forward through the power of media. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will move to the closing session now, before we completely say close out to SACEF 2024. Thank you, everyone.